Everybody wants some blast of magic, 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 magic. Oh, I got the magic in me.
Alright, it's time for the next episode of Magician 101, the show for all magicians. Now, in this episode, here's an outline for the show, where the show is going to go in the next few months. We're going to talk about all different performance styles of magic, like busking, kids parties, stage magic, mentalism, close-up, walk around, all those different styles over the next few months. The first thing we're going to do is talk about busking and street magic. We're going to talk about that aspect first. Now, the first thing is we're going to talk about what is the difference between street magic and busking. Is there a difference? Yes. In street magic, you're out on the street performing your magic just for fun and maybe to pass out a few business cards. With busking, you're out there for your end goal is to get as much money as possible. You want to get money, 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 money. You want to make as much money as possible. People who do street magic or do busking for a living, they actually support themselves with busking. They try to get as many people to watch the show as possible, and then they do their magic and pass a hat, which we'll talk about in a later episode about passing a hat. They try to pass the hat and get as much money as possible. Okay, so let's dive into now picking your location, where to busk, and I'm going to call this busking from now on, but the same rules will apply for street magic. Where to busk and the cops, because that's a big thing when you perform street magic. First thing you want to do, now I'm going to give you a big red flag warning here. Do not just go out there and start performing your magic on the street. Do not do it. Okay? I'm going to repeat that again. Do not go out there and start performing until you find out the laws of your town, city, and state. Because every state, every town, and every city is different with their street performing laws. In Montgomery County, Maryland, where I live, in Montgomery County, they say you can busk on the street if you're not taking money from people. If you're taking money, you need a permit to do it. And there's only a few select locations in Montgomery County you can busk that they will let you street perform. So, you really need to look at where you can and where you cannot busk, because it's going to make all the difference in the world. In D.C., I know of everywhere, as long as it's not government or private land in Washington, D.C., you can busk without a permit if it's public land. Same thing in Anacostia, Virginia, at their waterfront. You can busk there at the waterfront without having a permit. So just make sure you know the laws. Also, if you talk when you talk to people, do not call them over the phone. Do not call people over the phone. Either go to their office or email them, because you want to get something in writing. You want to be able to print something out and have it in hard copy. Hard copy is, this is hard copy. This is hard copy. You want to be able to have it in writing, so if a cop does come up and say you can't do that, you can say, well, I got permission from this person. There you go. Email is actually the best thing to do, because that way they don't think it's a forged piece of paper. Okay, so speaking of the cops, let's talk about the cops and getting hassled by them. Now, it's very rare that you'll get hassled by a cop. You might get a cop come up, and then if you don't actually find out the laws, you might have a cop come up to you and say, you can't do that here. The cops, every cop I've encountered, I've only encountered one. Well, I've encountered two, but one only told me to go somewhere else. The cop I encountered was very nice, and he said, listen, this is your first time performing here. And I was actually in Ocean City, Maryland on the boardwalk, because I had heard that, as long as you're not accepting money, you can go out there and perform. Well, they've actually changed the busking laws in Ocean City to where you can now perform on the boardwalk without a permit as long as you're on the end of one of the streets. So as long as you're like at the end of 16th Street, you can perform. If you're in the middle of the boardwalk, though, like you're just smack dab in the middle, you can't perform. But that's, yeah. But anyways, so he stopped me and said, your first time performing here? I'm like, yeah. I was like, well, you can't do your show here in the middle. You have to go over to the end of one of the streets. And I did, and cops gave me no problems after that. So a lot of times you'll get nice cops. Now, online, you might read horror stories on, like, busking websites that will say, oh, the cops are very mean and they're nasty and they're all pigs. And no, they're not. The cops are really, really nice. You know, I mean, cops usually won't hassle you as long as you're doing stuff right, as long as you have good crowd control, and we'll talk. That's an important thing we'll talk about later. Crowd control. Also, busking, and if you're doing everything right and you don't have a big crowd and you're not being too obnoxious as a street performer, they're not going to hassle you too much. As long as you, and even excuse me, I think I've been drinking. Even if you are doing something wrong, like if you're performing in the wrong spot, if you're nice about it and you're just like, I'm so sorry, I didn't know, 9 times out of 10 they'll say, it's quite okay, just move over there and you'll be good. But also, don't just go out and start street performing and it's totally illegal where you're at, and then you say, well, some guy on the internet told me to do it, because I'm not telling you to go out there and perform until you know the laws of where you perform, so make sure to do that. Now we're going to talk about location, where to perform your street magic. The big thing you never want to do, let's say that the camera is the road. Let's say you're performing in front of us, you've got like a really long stretch of sidewalk. Let's do the best case scenario. Let's do a little role play best case scenario here. The best case scenario, you're allowed to busk anywhere you want in your city. Let's say you've got this really big sidewalk. Like, I mean, the sidewalk is like this long and it's got good leg room so you can stand against the storefront and people still have room to walk behind your crowd. Let's say your road is the camera. What you never want to do is perform with your back to the road. Never perform with your back to the road. Why is that? Because you're going to have to compete with noise traffic. The best place to really perform your magic, if you can, if you're allowed to perform wherever you want, is to stand in between 2 storefronts. So let's say that my 2 bookcases here are storefronts. You want to stand in the middle. You don't want to stand in front of the door or a window of a storefront because the stores will not like it. If you block the people from coming into their store, they're either going to call the cops on you, which they don't do too much, but they'll come out and ask you to move. And that's very bad if you're in the middle of a show and they say, move. You're blocking our entrance. Because they don't like that. They're in the business to make money as well. Storefronts are. So, in between 2 storefronts, or if there's a closed down storefront. So let's say there's a store that's closed down and the store just, you know, is for lease. Well, stand in front of that store because then nobody can get mad at you and there's a great space. Also, if the store that's closed has an alcove, like let's say that there's like a nice covering over the door, like an awning over the door, and then there's like nice solid walls to the sides of you, and it makes like an alcove, that's a great place to perform because your voice will really project. If you have kind of a soft, quiet voice, street magic's not good for you. With street magic, you want to be loud. You want to be loud so everyone can hear you, especially if you have a big crowd. Some other good places to perform your street magic is in parks. If you can perform wherever you want, let's say you can, perform in a park. Like in DC, there's a bunch of circles. And the circles are actually really nice. There's DuPont Circle, which I know is a good place for street performers a lot of times. What DuPont Circle is, it's just as it sounds, it's in the DuPont neighborhood. It's a circle. There's a fountain in the middle. There is kind of a circle around the fountain with benches. And then around there's another circle where there's a park. It's kind of got like grass you can sit on. There's different walkways that kind of jettison out in all directions. So there's like nice walkways you can set up on. You can kind of set up in the grass a little bit, be off in the grass, so you know you got in the nice grass. And then around there are more benches in a big circle. So it's a nice place to perform, DuPont Circle. I performed there many a times. So it's really cool. So perform in a park like that or in a nice kind of open area. So those are really the 2 places you really want to perform your magic at. Also, Farmers markets are a great idea too, but I wouldn't recommend going there and doing a show until you get permission from the farmers market, because they might not like that. Because I know there's a farmers market where I live in Montgomery County, and they already have entertainment there. And I knew they had entertainment, so I asked them, and they said, well, we already have entertainment that performs. It's just a guy who, I think he does a guitar, and he just kind of sits there and plays songs. I mean, but they're like, well, we already got entertainment, so we don't really want you, or need you right now. We don't need you right now. They didn't say want me, because that was very rude. That was very rude. It's like, we don't want you. That'd be rude. Anyways, so don't perform, so get permission to perform. Everywhere you perform, get permission when you do street magic and busking. That is really all I wanted to talk about in this, was just kind of where to perform in the first one. Now, in the next thing, we're going to talk about selecting your tricks, how to draw a crowd, and also crowd management. So that's going to be really fun next week. I'm excited for next week's show. I'm excited to do crowd management tips. That's where a lot of street buskers get nervous, controlling crowds, because a lot of times when you perform, you can't have a huge crowd that spills into the street. And in Ocean City, Maryland, also, there's a tram on the boardwalk, and you can't have people step in the tram lane because they don't want to get hit by the tram. So I'll do some crowd management next week. That'll be really fun. Can't wait for that. Thanks for watching this shorter episode of Magician 101, the show for all magicians, and we'll see you next time on Magician 101.